It's Speaking with Gravity. On this podcast, we talk about mental health and how everything affects everything. With every episode, the goal is to have a conversation that will make you think, make you feel, make you do what is best for you. This isn't therapy, it's a podcast.
Welcome back to Speaking with Gravity, a podcast where we talk about how everything affects everything. The focus is mental health. Here it is, Season 7. I am Kervin, one of your hosts.
Yes, and I'm Hannah.
And I'm Brittany.
And Brittany is actually our special guest for today. We're going to talk about a pretty heavy topic, a topic that we don't always like to discuss in our homes or in general. But we'll get into that. So right now we're going to have Hannah take it away with the QD of the hour.
Hey guys, welcome back to Season 7. The QD of the hour says, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, estimates that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys will experience sexual abuse before they are 18.
So, and speaking about that, the topic for today is the sex talk you never had, addressing sexual abuse. Again, we have a special guest who is very, very, very knowledgeable when it comes down to this. She provides this education from time to time. So, Brittany, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself. As Jay-Z would say, allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself. Tell us basically your background, what you're doing right now, how you got onto this journey, and whatever else you want to share with us.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. So basically, my background really comes from just genuinely want to help people. That's where it starts. I grew up watching my mom do it, helping people in the neighborhood. A lot of my friends, at least 3 of my friends growing up had lived with me at some point because there are issues with the parents in the household. So just kind of growing up around my mom helping somebody all the time, my daddy helping somebody all the time, it just kind of came natural. What really landed me on this side of helping people when it comes to sexual abuse or sexual assault is really because I know more people who have experienced sexual abuse or sexual assault than people who haven't. God bless me to not have experienced it, but I'm still just as passionate about it. It's one of the things, even as a kid, that I couldn't understand, why somebody would want to violate another person in that way. And so it's been a disgust for me since then. So kind of how I got started working with kids and adults who have experienced this, I started when I worked at the Juvenile Correctional Center up in Columbia. So I was an officer there, and I only worked with boys at that time.
Ooh, I bet that had to be tough for you.
It was
Interesting.
It was an experience. When I left, I didn't want to leave, to be honest with you, because I felt like I was making a difference, with the kids up there. You would hear stories. Of course, these kids are in juvenile prison for a murder or some rape. And things like that. I had a couple of kids, one that was there for murder. He had murdered his stepfather, but the stepfather was abusing him sexually. Mom was making him sleep outside in the doghouse because that's what the stepfather made her, do. And in that time, he was also being abused. So this is when I really started to say, okay, I knew this happened to some friends of mine, some people I might have known in my past, but really looking at a child's face and them telling me this is what happened to them, it really kind of put the fire behind it for me. So moving from there, leaving the juvenile center, I came down and started at Beyond Abuse. Started out as the client service representative there, and that's just working with people at the front, that's doing the scheduling. And then that's kind of what opened my eyes even more at how often it was happening. And when I say how often, remember with Beyond Abuse, we are covering Abbeville, Greenwood, Lawrence, Newberry. And for y'all who don't know what Beyond Abuse is, it's a child advocacy center and adult sexual assault center dealing with child victims of physical and sexual abuse, as well as adults who have been victimized in some sexual assault some way. So what happened was I got started with them, client services. they wanted to promote me probably about 3 months after I started with them. And it's crazy because the executive director at that time was Tanya, a lady named Tanya. And she was like, Brittany, you need to apply for this. And I'm like, no, I've only been here 3 months. I'm not ready for a management position to manage a whole office. She was like, yeah, you are. You know, she was talking me into it. I'm like, And I was still kind of going to school at the time. So I just went at a place where I felt like, I was where I need to be. But I applied, anyway. And ended up getting the position where I managed the Lawrence office. And we dealt with kids, babies, infants who couldn't talk. We serviced teenagers, kids in elementary, middle school. And when I kind of realized that, okay, I got to find another way to get more information out there, is because they would send in intakes. Law enforcement, DSS would send us documents saying we have a case with this child. We want you guys to interview them. We want therapy for them. When that fax machine would go off after about a few months doing that job, I started to kind of jump, like, oh man, it's another case. Because I have to see it, I have to read it, I have to put it in the system, word for word, very verbatim. So it was rough for me. And so that's kind of how I left that position, still in Beyond Abuse, moved over to the education part of things, because I'm a talker. And so when I got into education, which is what I'm doing now, education outreach, I'm able to go out into the communities, into the schools, and train children on how to report sexual abuse, what it looks like, what safe touch and unsafe touch looks like, what the difference is. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now. So whether it's talking to kids, whether it's talking to staff on mandated reporting in some kind of way, that's kind of what I want to do as far as keeping people informed.
So, with all of this, when we're talking about sexual abuse, I always like to define. So we know what we're talking about. So in how would you define sexual abuse? And before you go there, right, in my plain terms, growing up, my thought process was no means no. And outside of that, as long as it's consensual, it's good. Of course, there's the age thing there, but outside of that, if it's all good, it's all good. And as I've grown, I've realized that it's more to it than just that. So, what is, can you define or tell us what we're talking about when we're saying sexual abuse?
So let me start with the textbook definition of sexual abuse, which is the action of either coercing or forcing someone to participate or do some form of sexual act. What a lot of people, when they hear abuse, they think kids. They think small children. They think elderly or somebody who can't fight back. You can be married, and be assaulted. There's a such thing as marital rape. So it's not just children. It can be adults. Some examples of that, get a little graphic a little bit, y'all. Some examples of that would be somebody forcing you to touch them in a place, private area in their body, somebody forcing you to look at something that is of sexual content, anything that is unwanted, whether you are a child or an adult, anything in a sexual manner that is unwanted, that is considered sexual abuse. And that can happen over a wide range of things, a wide range of actions.
Can it? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm glad you emphasized that it can happen to either children or adults, because sometimes I feel like our community minimizes the impact if it happens to an adult versus a child. Of course, because a child is more vulnerable, but I'm glad that you emphasized the age difference.
Right, absolutely.
What if it's unwanted after the fact? So, I'm speaking in terms of college age, adult age people. So, we all adult age, we intimate. And then it comes down, I don't know if I really wanted to do what I did last night. Would that still be considered sexual abuse? Because, sometimes you got alcohol, you got stuff involved, and then you might have did something that you wouldn't normally do. It's kind of out of character. And then after thinking about it, like, dang.
That regret.
Yeah, that regret. Is it just regret, or is it?
Well, that kind of comes with a lot of factors. You brought in alcohol and things like that, being in college. So the biggest thing from my experience is education. So kind of educating parents, educating their sons, parents educating their daughters so that they understand what consent is, understanding that if you make a certain decision and you're sober under that decision, then that will bring, make it a little bit tougher to say after the fact, okay, that was definitely abuse, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When there are substances used, so alcohol, drugs, whatever the case may be, we should be educating whether it's a boy, girl, whoever, we should be educating our children that there shouldn't be any sexual acts going on while we are under the influence, especially if you are in college. The safest way is to just not put yourself in a situation or be in a situation as long as you can control it. If you are under the influence or around others who are under the influence because of that very thing. Regret is one thing, but abuse is different. You know what I mean?
So if I'm talking to, and I have boys and girls, and they're obviously they're teens now, so they're gonna get ready to go. If I'm preparing them for the world, what's that preparation like for my son? And is it different for? I'm asking you a whole bunch of questions at the same time, but is it different for my son and my daughter, or is it the same? Is it the same message? We're saying educate, or you said education, right? So what am I educating? What specifically am I putting out there for them?
Okay, so the message, the goal is the same, but what we teach them is going to be a little bit different. And not because you as a parent may believe in this whole double standard thing, but realistically, that's what's in society. So when we're talking to our sons, it's more so making sure they understand that there needs to be consent, verbal consent. I do not believe in a nod. I don't believe in we felt like it was okay. There needs to be a question asked, again, with no substances. Direct, absolutely. There needs to be a question asked. Are you okay if we do whatever y'all are about to do?
Now, you know that's going to mess up the chemistry, right?
It might. It might. But we'll rather mess up the chemistry rather than we have that person regretting at the end and trying to figure out, oh, my God, I don't know if I was supposed to do that or if I wanted that. We need to ask that question, up front, making sure that the person that we want to be involved with in that way, we're on the same page. If that person isn't as educated as you about it, their parents haven't educated them, I would say go the other way. You need to be with somebody who is equally understanding of you being able to ask that question as far as consent. And that's for boys. Understanding that if there's a no, if there's a discomfort, you immediately, you retreat, you go back, you stop, whatever that means, whether that's stopping or going to another room. If there's any discomfort, any question mark, there needs to be a stop. And for our girls, the biggest thing with our girls, from my experience, is making sure they understand that, like what we talked about before, if there's substance use involved in this act, then that's going to make this thing a lot more difficult. Because at that point, we don't know if this is something you have decided to do in a sober mind. You know what I mean? And it's easier, again, just take out all substances. If this is going to be something that you're going to do, it needs to be done with a sober, clear mind, and we can't do that when we're drinking or using drugs.
So, from the boy's standpoint, he need a hard yes, a definitive yes.
Yes.
And if there's any type of no, any type of doubt, it don't even have to be a hard no, just any type of doubt.
Any doubt.
Then
Call it off.
That's a wrap.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. I really like that. Now I can go ahead and share that. Of course, I have my own way of doing things, but I definitely like the way that you put that. So you're into, do you go to colleges and talk to? Okay.
Yep.
So you go to colleges and you go to the?
Grade school. So from K4 up to 12. Because for one thing, for the state of South Carolina, is what we call Aaron's Law. So that law requires me, and this law was placed in 2016, where it requires people like me, education managers or people who do education, go into public schools and teach them about how to report. What's safe touch, unsafe touch, trusted adults. And it changes levels depending on the age and the grades. But it's actually a law here that Erin Marin is the person who started this law. She was abused as a child. And she talked about how she didn't have any information as far as how to report it. She even moved to another state and was abused again by a different person. And was able to finally tell her mom and dad what was going on. And so what she did, she grew up, she went to college, she got a college degree. She was a youth counselor at first, and then she stopped doing that and started traveling to all 50 states. Right now, it's passed in 38 states that it is required for someone to go into the public schools and teach kids about body safety, how to report abuse, what's okay and what's not okay. So that's one reason that I do what I do. It's required by law. So that's K-4 up to 12th grade, and then I go into colleges as well. And in colleges, we talk a little bit about what we just talked about, consent, date rape, dating violence, things like that.
So what I hear is that this law recently passed in 2016, but the issue of sexual assault or sexual abuse, it's been going on for generations. And I'm glad that even though it's a recent change, that change has come about, especially in public schools, and hopefully in the future, private schools and charter schools will, incorporate that curriculum in.
Right.
Yeah. So are you able to go into the charter schools?
I can. So as of right now, I've reached out to the one here in Greenwood, and I haven't heard back just yet. Yeah. But I can. What I do is I go out to anybody who have me. I go out into churches. I did a couple programs a few months ago at some churches. Last year, I covered some churches who invited me to come in. So I send letters out. That's what I do, for a living. I try to get into the churches, the charter schools, anybody that have me, really.
So you said there's a law that says we need to have this. It's in 38 states that you're providing education, right? So in that law, are you the one that go out and ask to come, or that people you just sit and wait till people ask for you to come to them, like the schools, the churches? I mean, how does that work?
So the schools who are aware, by now, most of them are aware that because they have to do it. It's required.
Okay, so it's required.
It's
for
required.
The school
So yeah, it's required
to
for public
bring
school.
you guys in. Okay, all right.
So they have to do it. And then the ones that don't require that, I'm still going out. I'm still sending letters. I'm still calling and saying, hey, this is what we do. This is who I am.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm still proactive about it.
Okay.
And I have a quick question. What is the feedback that you've seen in the schools when you go out and provide this education about sexual assault? What's the feedback or the responses you've seen from the students and also from the teachers?
The students, it just depends on the age. Kids say the darndest things. So small children, they may say, what are you talking about, lady? Or, why are you telling me this? But teachers, they love it. You may have one or two, just kind of get nervous about it, which is why I'm glad we're talking about it, because people have this false idea that what I'm going to in the school to do is to teach sex ed, and that's not what I'm doing. Right. There's nothing sexual about what I'm talking, to the kids. But for the most part, the teachers respond very well. They know what's very much needed. I also train these same teachers, the staff, on mandate reporting. That's another thing I'll go in and do. So they're familiar with me. They know me. They trust what I'm saying when I come into the school. So I've gotten really good feedback.
That's good.
How do one report it? And in this case, I'm talking about kind of like children. Is it just tell my teacher? Or is it like when you say teach them how to report, is it like a certain protocol?
So that's a few different things. The first thing is educating them first on what do you need to report. So when we talk about safe touch and unsafe touch, teaching them the difference between the two. And we also train them when they're young, between K-4 and 5th grade. We talk about trusted adults. Now, I even talk to my middle school and high schools about trusted adults. I use a different term, somebody you can trust, or, of course, somebody you can talk to when you're hurt, and that they won't judge you and they're going to listen to you. But when it comes to the small children, making sure they understand first, like I said, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And then making sure they are comfortable telling somebody, whether it's at school. Because what happens is, from my experience, kids don't tell parents. That's usually the last people or person they want to tell, because they're so worried about the parents being sad. Even elementary kids, so worried about the parents being mad if they embarrass the parent. So it's important that the kids know they have somebody else other than the person in the home. And when I go into the schools and I'm talking to small children about trusted adults and making sure they understand that it's okay, that if you get that feeling in your stomach and something is wrong, that you tell somebody. The biggest thing about this is making sure they have somebody in the school. I ask them, could it be somebody that take care of you outside of school? It may not always be a parent. I don't tell them. I think it's big that we don't teach children who their trusted adults should be.
Right.
I ask them who their trusted adults are, because it could be different.
Give them that power, that autonomy.
Right. And let them tell me, because that lets me know that this is something that person has done to make them feel that way. If I go in saying, hey, police officers or doctors or your mom, your dad, what if they had a negative experience at the doctor? What if they had a negative experience with the police officer?
Them.
You know what I mean? So I kind of leave that open. But that's the biggest thing, just telling them the difference between the two, what's safe and unsafe, and then making sure they have somebody they can lean on outside the home.
That's important.
You know, we had this push for a while. You're not alone. Well, I think it's kind of still a push with mental health. You're not alone. You're not alone. Is that something that you kind of give them too when you're in there talking to them? Okay.
That's the biggest thing I want them to know.
And how do they respond to that? Just you're not alone. Do you get more people more willing to be like, okay, I'm not alone now? You get this stuff dumped on you.
Yeah, we still talking about small kids.
Anybody.
Or just anybody.
Anybody.
Okay. That starts to become a little bit more challenging when you're dealing with adults, of course. So when you're talking to adults, what I've learned has been the easiest way, the best way for me to get this information across to people is to make sure that as I'm talking with them, that they know that I'm just talking with them and I'm not talking at them. Okay. You know, I'm not giving them some directive. I'm not giving them some, bullet, group of bullet points of what they should or shouldn't be doing. It's more so, I want them to see the genuine care. Yeah. Once I can come across and get them to understand that this is something I'm doing because I genuinely care, then I get a better response. Yeah. And they believe what I'm saying. Like, yeah, there are people out there. There are resources. You are not alone. Like, that's reality.
And it also builds trust, too.
Which is a big thing. Being able to trust what the person who's talking to you, what they're telling you, and being able to rely on it and it being valid.
So after we're talking about reporting it, sharing it with whomever, of course there's if you do report it, there are some steps that happens after that. So I guess specifically with, not necessarily with Beyond Abuse, but agencies like Beyond Abuse, where do they come in at after it's been reported?
Okay. So when you make a report about physical or sexual abuse, it goes through the law enforcement or DSS. Now, what a lot of people don't understand, I'm going to say this for the educators too, what a lot of people don't understand is that they have the choice to accept the case. So
who has the choice?
Law enforcement or DSS.
Really?
See, that's what a lot of people miss when it comes to mandated reporting. I can report 50 times a week, but if this is not a case that the state deems that is qualified in what they see as something that warrants an investigation, then a lot of times, especially in DSS, we'll see just community services, meaning they'll send somebody out from one of the local community centers like Westview Behavioral and have somebody go out and just kind of check on the family, but it may not qualify as an investigation that needs to be done. And so sometimes I'll get, well, why are we reporting if it's not going to be accepted? Because we need a paper trail. Because usually if there's one report made, either there's already been a report before that or they're going to continue to come until the investigation is done. An example with law enforcement may be you may have two 13-year-old cousins and two cousins, let's say two cousins, and they may be involved in some type of sexual act and one parent finds out, reports it, and they may want to report it to law enforcement. Well, these are two children, two minors. They have the ability to say, well, as long as DSS is involved, the parents have come in and said, we're going to keep them separated. This is the plan that we're putting in place to keep them supervised. If that happens, they're not going to accept that case because there's no law being broken there. The parents aren't allowing it. That's the only thing. As long as they know the parents aren't allowing it, the parents are taking the necessary steps to protect the children, they don't have to accept that case.
So what I'm hearing is that the parents have a lot of decision-making in this whole process.
Yeah. And that's why education is a huge, huge part of that.
And even from a mandating reporter standpoint, I like the stuff that you're telling me because sometimes you get to the point where it's heavy. Like, okay, if I report this, then this is going to happen and this is going to happen and all of that is on me.
Right.
But ultimately, from a mandated reporter standpoint, your thought process should be, I'm going to report this and whatever happens after that just happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whether it gets kicked back or they actually get pulled from the home.
You did your part.
You did your part, yeah. And I like how you said, too, about the paper trail because that is so true.
Yeah.
If you don't report it, if you never say anything, this one individual can keep going and going. Kind of, the first thought that came to my mind was a couple of years ago they did a documentary on the gymnastic team, the coach who was doing stuff. And, I would like to think that that's the extreme, that's one of the extremes of it. But had it been reported, would he have been able to continue over the years?
Right.
Had there been a paper trail that was started on him or given to him. But was there a paper trail? Don't let me get into it. I go down this rabbit hole trying to figure out was there an actual paper trail. But after you report it, they have the law has the chance to decide whether they're going to actually go further into it. But what about whether, no matter what's done, what about after that? The aftermath of, okay, this happened to me. Now what? So how does these different agencies come into place? I know, obviously, I'm a therapist, so they can find me or many other therapists. But after the aftermath, how does the agencies come into play with that?
So for beyond abuse, once law enforcement or DSS has accepted the case, because we only get cases that have been accepted to be investigated. And so what our job is, we have forensic interviewers, and the forensic interviewers are people who are specially trained in interviewing children who have been victims of some type of physical or sexual abuse. The reason they exist is because a lot of times law enforcement and DSS have a different way of investigating or questioning a victim, and sometimes those aren't always received. So we use forensic interviewers to especially train and talk to children who are victims of sexual abuse. So that can be from ages 3 to 17. And then at Beyond Abuse, we also have therapy services, which is free. And that's another thing. Let me just say that real quick. Everything is free. So at Beyond Abuse, if you are a victim of some type of abuse and you come in for therapy or you come in for interview services or advocacy services, it's free.
That's amazing.
So we're very happy about that. If you are an adult who have been abused at some point and feel like you need to get therapy for it, you didn't deal with it as a child, you can come to Beyond Abuse. That'll be free. Free services. We do have a few other agencies, and I don't know their specific the specific ways they're able to come into play, kind of curve and answer your question once a case has been accepted, because that's the biggest thing. It's hard to kind of say what would be next, because if the case isn't accepted, we won't know about it. So
y'all don't get every case that happens. All right, so somebody reports it. It's reported to DSS or law enforcement. Y'all don't get all of those cases. Law enforcement and DSS will send people to y'all. So even if it's law enforcement don't do anything, but DSS get involved, they may send it to you.
Absolutely.
But even still, y'all, out of all of those, y'all still might not get.
Right.
Everyone.
We may not get every case. And like I said, the reason that paper trail is important because you may have reported 2 years ago and maybe that case didn't get accepted, but if there's a paper trail, you go to report again or somebody else reports in a different grade or whatever, same child, and we get that, we're able to go back and use that paper trail as, okay, that can be evidence on their side that maybe this is true, maybe this is happening. So that paper trail is very, very, very important whether the case is accepted or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I brought up the gymnastics thing, but with every situation, it really is case by case. You don't know what's happening. And we always like to look back and say, woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Right.
What if this happened? What if that happened? But we don't know about the reporting. We don't know who got the report and what they saw in the report when they got it. So we just got to do, every person, myself included, need to think about just my part.
Right.
What can I do to remedy it, or either remedy the situation or even do better. Which, again, as I'm thinking about it, it's heavy, man, because you gave the QD of the hour, 1 in 4 women. And
1 in 13 boys.
Yeah. I say sometimes, men are buttholes. And, I'm one, right? And I had to grow to where I'm at today, but education. We can't stop providing that for me. Even when I do these podcasts, sometimes it's a little something hit me when I start thinking about the information that we're actually putting out there. I remember having a conversation with my mom, and she was talking about how prevalent it is, sexual abuse is, and then to go back and read it and studying and stuff like that, the research, 1 in 4. That's scary. That's really scary. If you got 4 daughters, one of them have it's a possibility that one of them might experience that.
And just to add, that's just the estimated numbers, you know,
Let's go by
or
what's been
the
reported.
reported numbers.
Exactly.
What about the cases that haven't been reported, or like you
Right.
said, the cases that haven't been accepted but it's still going on? 1 in 14 girls and supposedly 1 in 13 boys. And just from you working at the correctional facility in Columbia, you know that 1 in 13 may really not be an accurate number. It's
Right.
just something we can, you know, go off of.
And that's the thing about boys is that they don't report it as much. They're not educated or pressed as much as women or girls are, from my experience.
Yeah, you assume that they can handle themselves.
Yeah.
They assume that.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Everybody kind of, we just assume that we can handle ourselves, not thinking about, you know, they put in uncomfortable situations sometimes too. So
Yeah.
And then also, if those individuals don't seek the proper treatment or the proper help, they can potentially start creating a pattern and potentially start victimizing other people.
based on what they've experienced in the past. Yeah, we have a tendency to do that. So if you had to say, Brittany, if you had to say anything just in general to people that's listening, before we get to the parents, just anybody listening.
Oh, you said before we get to the parents?
Yeah, before we get to the parents. We go to the parents. Right? We're going to say the parents for last. But,
Okay.
Or we'll break it down. We won't say, we'll go in order. We want to talk to the school age. I'm talking from kids up until maybe like the 5th, 6th grade. Talk to them. And then I want you to talk to, what would you say to the middle schooler / high schooler? Then the adult, from college all the way up to adulthood. And then we can go to the parents.
Okay.
And you can combine those.
All right. When I'm talking to small children, it's hard for me to talk about small children without talking about the parent because it plays such a, you know what I mean? They're
a major
so,
role.
yeah, they only know what they know. So if it's okay, I just want to say this one thing as far as about the parents. I can go ahead and start with that. The huge thing from my experience is making sure that parents, we are telling children that, for one, sexual abuse exists. Having the conversation, we're teaching them about everything else, how to share, you know, how to be respectful, how to behave. You know, we're talking about that all the time. But we need to tell them sexual abuse exists. We talk about stranger danger. You know, we need to talk about that. One of the biggest things I see with this age of children that you just talked about, K4 and let's say up to 5th grade, teach these kids the name of their body parts. Teach them penis and vagina. Teach them private area, whatever. Something that lets somebody else know that when they're wanting to say, hey, Uncle Jimmy keeps messing with, you know, don't tell them purple dinosaur. Don't tell them pocketbook. Don't tell them, I don't know, red fire trucks. Because we hear that. We've had cases where children have come in and said, have been abused since age 3, and now we just now finding out and getting a case at age 9 because they've been at school saying, well, I told my teacher he was messing with my purple dinosaur. I told the teacher that. The teacher don't know what that is. You know what I mean? So that's a big pet peeve, if y'all can tell. It's a pet peeve of mine. Teach the children the names of their genitals and their body parts, or if you want them to say private area, that's fine. That at least tells, because they're not going to tell you first. 9 times out of 10, these small children will not tell you first. So just making sure that they know that. And so going into when I'm talking to the children at the schools, of course, I have to talk to them in a way that is very generic. I'm not allowed to go in and say, hey, this is what this is what this is called, because there is a fine line. Unfortunately, everybody has made it a taboo, you know, subject. So even when I am educating children, I use images, very age-appropriate images, not of body parts, but just of children that look like them.
But right there. This is a pet peeve of mine.
Okay.
We're talking about age-appropriate pictures, right? Which is cool. But then you want to give them a cell phone. There's no, when I say them, I mean these kids. There's so many ways to, you're on YouTube. There's not necessarily age-appropriate stuff on YouTube, but then you want to be concerned about the person who's educating your child, making sure that they have age appropriate. You're a little bit too late. And
I agree.
I was talking to my youngest daughter the other day, and she was saying that her friend has a cell phone. She's in the 3rd grade. And it's cool. I'm not saying people can't have cell phones in the 3rd grade, but what you're doing is you're giving them the world in third grade.
Yeah.
You know, we can
Easy
find
access.
anything on our phones. And now we got AI capability. You can literally put anything in there and AI can read it and like give you more of that that you're searching for. But we're concerned about age appropriate pictures.
Right.
If you're so concerned about that, then you might want to reconsider putting a computer in their hand. And on top of that, not monitoring that computer.
Right.
And I mean going beyond just adding an app to it. I mean going back and like really looking to see where they were at 2 o'clock in the morning or where they was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What was they looking at on those phones? Not just for the school age, the grade level kids, but also for middle school and high school. You know, but I'm sorry, I digress. When you say age appropriate, we always talk about age appropriate, but then we put the phone in their hand, and they can find anything on that phone.
Absolutely, yeah. And I agree with that. That's what makes it hard. We talked a little bit earlier about if I like talking. You remember we talked about that. In situations where I'm, of course, working for a company or agency and I have to, abide by those guidelines in that type of setting, it makes it difficult because I just want to say straight out, look, this is what this is. This is what nobody should be, So I'm very informal when I go into these trainings and do these things because that's what makes people comfortable. They don't want somebody coming in a suit all buttoned up, you know what I mean? Because then they're going to say, oh, she's just talking at me. She's just throwing out directives. So when I do talk to the children, I just have to use very safe words. And I say private zone. That's the term we use.
Private zone.
Private zone. And we talk about where those can be. Now, I know we specifically focus on, when we see sexual abuse education for young children, we specifically focus on, we're talking about the body parts that are underneath your bathing suit. That's what I usually see being taught. I don't usually teach that. I teach that there are some private parts of your body that shouldn't come into contact with other, people's private areas that are underneath your bathing suits. But then we have hands that's not underneath your bathing suit. We have faces, mouths, eyes. And those parts of your body can also be violated, by a predator. So I revamped a lot of my presentations. I keep pushing the envelope a little bit to make it... to make sure they get all of the information. Because sometimes some people are literal. Some children may say, well, she said the parts under my bathing suit, but then maybe somebody has forced that child to do something with their mouth. You understand? And maybe they're saying, she didn't teach me about this, so I don't need to tell this. So I'm big on images. I show mouths, eyes, hands. You know what I mean? I incorporate all of that so that they know all of this is yours. Your body is yours. Your body belongs to you from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. That's the biggest thing I teach children. And I teach them boundaries. If you come to class and your classmate say, hey, I'm going to give you a hug today, and you say, well, I don't really want a hug, I teach them this. You say no, and you get that choice. And if somebody forces you into a hug, that is not okay. You need to let somebody know. Right. So stuff as simple as just a hug that I didn't want. You know what I mean? If you can start setting boundaries with something that small, everything else kind of comes with that.
When you say that leads me to boundaries. I know you said specifically about hugs, but do you kind of talk about how to set boundaries for little kids? Because, we have a tendency, I think I was reading somewhere, I was reading a book, I have to come up with, I don't know her name right now, but she talked about how we will do kids. Oh, go hug your uncle. That person being nice, you're making them, and I never thought about it from that that situation, but do you talk about setting boundaries with having kids to learn how to set boundaries so that they can effectively communicate, I don't really want to do this?
So that's exactly why I use the hug. Because growing up, I know in our culture, exactly what you just said. Well, go hug Uncle so-and-so or hug grandma, auntie, whoever. My 4-year-old, she don't have to hug me if she don't want to. Because I teach her, and I teach all of my children, 4, 7, and 10. If you want to high five, I don't care if it's just high five. You don't have to. It's your hand. You get to make that choice. And so I do tell kids, when I go into school, I do teach them those kind of boundaries, along with my training that, hey, high five, a hug, or a fist bump. If you don't want to, you just simply don't have to. You get to make that choice. That's why I think it's important for them to understand that your body belongs to you. Right. From the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. every touch or physical contact that is made, if it is ever something that you didn't want, you have the right to let that person first let the person know who's doing it, so they know this isn't something that you're okay with, and they know that you can tell them that. So make sure I tell them that, speak up for yourselves and let people know, and then let somebody else know, an adult.
And then it also extends past that. As a parent or as a teacher, that's our responsibility to kind of assess why does this child not want to, hug so-and-so, or why do they not even want to share a fist pump with a certain person. The child, that's not the child's responsibility to assess that situation or to know, okay, I'm in a dangerous situation. That's an adult's responsibility. So I can see why you say the parents play such a major role, especially when it comes to minors.
Right, absolutely. Because if we teach our kids, if my 4-year-old comes up to me and say, I don't want to hug him, I don't want to, and maybe nothing might even happen, it just, they don't want to feel like giving you a hug. It could just be that. I say, okay, well, you don't have to, because if I start telling her, yes, you do have to hug them, even if it's your daddy or your brother, that's going to teach them that, I don't have any control. I don't have any power over my body. If somebody wants to do something, and it's nice for me to let them do it. You know what I mean? I don't teach that, because that's not reality. I'm not about to set them up like that.
Ooh. We're about to go down the rabbit hole now. And the reason I said it, when you said daddy, I was like, dang, what if that was happening to me? What if my daughter didn't want to hug me, no matter what age? And it's like, how do I deal with that? Because on one hand, like you were saying, if I try to force it, it's like I'm then teaching her that it doesn't matter.
Right.
You don't have control over your body. But then on the other hand, it's like, but I'm her dad. Right. So it ain't easy being a parent, number one, but also we still at the end of the day have to consider what every move that we're making. We have to consider how it's affecting and what it's actually teaching the people that's around us. Any final thoughts from you about anything? Or actually, you know what? Before you say that, I wanted to talk about healthy relationships. You talk about that in there. Any thoughts on like healthy relationships? And I'm talking about intimate relationships more so than friendships. But any thoughts on those healthy relationships?
Couple of things. When I start getting to healthy relationships and things like that, I move up into the high school and college area, or talking to just adults or staff. But the biggest thing about healthy relationships is understanding what that even is.
Yes.
So knowing what that looks like, because a lot of times you get a lot of unhealthy relationships because people just don't know that what they're doing is unhealthy.
Normalized it.
Right. Or the way I'm being treated is not healthy. People don't know. So again, education, coming back to, I always tell students at college, if you see them advertising somebody coming in to talk to you all about healthy relationships and you feel like, wow, I know what a relationship should look like. I don't need that.
Do you?
You probably need to come on over there. You probably need to come on over there and listen, because you won't believe how many sororities or different groups I've spoken to at Lander who I break down some things when it comes to healthy relationships. Something as simple as we may have let's say a male and female relationship where the male may be very controlling. I don't want you hanging out with your friends. I want you to stay with me. You belong to me. Those people that say, we've been dating for 2 weeks. Oh, we got to celebrate that 2-week anniversary of you being mine. Things like that. Those very obsessive type, you know what I mean? The girl in that situation may feel, well, something's not right. He wanted some type of picture of me. I sent him an inappropriate picture. He showed somebody. Then he says, well, no, it's not bad. You look so good. I'm showing you off. Yeah. A lot of times we see relationships like that. And this girl she knows to the extent that I got this gut feeling. This is not okay. I need to do something different. I need to change. But she continues, in that relationship. So a lot of times when I'm teaching about that, I may give this very same example. And I'll say, okay, who is right? Who is wrong? Did both parties play a role? We talk about that, and everybody, well, he did this, he did that. Well, what did she do? Is there something she could have done better? Because she knew. She had a feeling. So that's not blaming. That's saying accountability. That's saying, because if we don't make these people on the other end victims, or the people who've gotten the brunt of the bad treatment, if we don't tell them that, okay, let's take some accountability for what we could learn. That doesn't mean we're blaming you. That's giving them a new way of thinking. That's teaching them that you can be much stronger than you thought you were before going into this thing. So that's when I do healthy relationships, that's what we talk about.
You really like you like talking about healthy relationships.
Yeah, that's my thing. That's my thing.
I almost shouted over here when you said that about accountability, because we can always learn from every situation. Even if I was wronged, there's still something that I can look at to see, all right, what did I do? What could I have done differently so that it doesn't duplicate itself, right? And I definitely need to get with you on healthy relationships, because I want to kind of make that a part of my brand, if you will, because people feel like they know what healthy relationships is, but how do you know?
Right.
Did you see it in your home? What are you watching on TV? Because you're influenced.
Music.
What music you're listening to, all of our experiences, whether they're real and personable, or if we're just taking it in from entertainment,
Right.
they all influence us as to what our idea of a healthy relationship is. Sometimes me and my wife, we will go out of town alone, and I get that question all the time. She let you go out of town? Or vice versa, you let her go out of town. That works for us. We do vacations alone, we do them together, so it just works for us. But we've kind of built our healthy relationship, and then of course our kids are going to be influenced by that to some degree. But I love when you say it. If you think you know what a healthy relationship is, you probably need to go in that class.
Yeah, come on to see me.
All right. I didn't have anything else. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with people, Brittany? Did you have anything you just dying to get out there?
Just one last thing,
Okay,
y'all. I'm done, y'all. Just last thing.
Go ahead.
So being aware of grooming, understanding what grooming is. So grooming is basically when someone comes in, manipulates a child or an adult. People think grooming only happens to children. I'm going to tell you something about that. So when somebody comes in to manipulate you or convince you that they're there for you, they're here to protect you, but they really want to get you alone so that they can victimize you. In my business and what I see, parents are groomed first. So a lot of times we get these outs, because 90% of children who are abused by somebody they know. So that few percent that's left, when you get somebody who is a coach or godparent, and not saying this is everybody, but this is just from my experience. Somebody outside the family wants to make the family feel comfortable with them being with their child alone. Those are the people that you pay attention to. Not saying that everybody's godparents or coaches or whatever is, predators, but just being aware that when you meet new people, new friends, new coworkers, and they become close to your family, just keep an eye out, because a lot of times I'm not talking about one-parent households. I'm talking about we have cases where mama and daddy then came in because they both were groomed first, and that person got to the child. So be aware of grooming. That's it. That's my last thing.
And we all know the example in social media of, celebrities that, have groomed other people. But I'm just so happy that you're spreading light and awareness on such a sensitive yet serious topic. This topic is needed to discuss within our community and all communities.
Right.
So I'm definitely appreciative that you're spreading positive light and awareness on this.
Yeah. I'm glad you add that a little bit in there too, because we didn't cover that, and that's definitely important. All right, so when we coming to an end, want to do some calls to action. Make sure you subscribe to Speaking with Gravity on Facebook, Instagram. Facebook and Instagram now has threads. We're on that too. I don't know if anybody else is on there, but TikTok and then Twitter as well. We'll make it easy for you and put in the show notes. What else we got here? I have a BIPOC wellness group every fourth Monday for men only. BIPOC men, I should say. So if anybody listening to this, the fourth Monday of each month, just look for us on social media, and the time and the place will be put out there. Shout out to Mr. Winston for what he do for us each and every episode. We're appreciative of him. Check him out on winstonjstewart.com. Hannah, Brittany, is anything y'all got popping that y'all want to share with us that y'all got going on? And with Brittany, you talked about that step team. You don't want to put that out there?
Oh, well, yeah. Thank you. I did. So I am right now one of the head coaches of the Black Diamond Step team here in Greenwood. We'll be at the Legacy Community Centers on Wednesdays starting on September 6th. Wednesdays, 5:30, 7:30. And then on Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., it's not just a step team. We'll be mentoring. We'll have mental health people come in and speak. Kirby, you'll be one of those people we're going to be inviting. We already got you down.
She's going to put me out there.
So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of mentoring going on, a lot of community work with these steppers. So, yeah, if you got a child or you know anybody from age 6 to 18 that would like to be a part of first grade to 12th grade, just bring them on out to Legacy Community Center. That's at 801 Reynolds Street over here in Greenwood.
Sounds good.
Did you have anything?
I'm good for today.
Okay. And you just said that about grooming. You had a whole 40-something minutes or maybe an hour, I don't know how long this is going to be, where you got to know Brittany enough where you can say, oh, yeah, I do want to put my child because in the step team, because now you know what's going to be given to your child while they're there. All right. Thank you, Brittany, for your insight, sharing your insight with us, your expertise on the topic, everything that you brought to us, to our listeners. Thank y'all for joining us. You could be doing anything in the world, but you chose to listen to us or watch us, and we appreciate it. I appreciate that. So remember, this isn't therapy. It's a podcast.